Good evening. Welcome to Disability Rights Maryland's Breaking Barriers Awards Gala. My name is Robin Murphy, and I am the Executive Director of Disability Rights Maryland. I could not be more excited that you're joining us this evening. We have 4 outstanding honorees who we will be featuring tonight as our champions. Floyd Hartley, who is chair of the Consumers for Accessible Ride Services, the group we will be giving an award to. Andrew Levy, a highly regarded Maryland attorney. Wade Henderson, a civil rights icon. And for the first time, we are naming an award in honor of Judith Heumann for her relentless advocacy to make full inclusion a basic human right. I could not let this evening go by without mentioning that our hearts go out to our friends, our colleagues, and the communities we serve who have suffered so much during this pandemic. However, tonight is a night for celebration. Together we can celebrate and obtain renewed strength to continue the battle for equity for all. Our staff has been incredible during this time period. They have come up with creative and innovative ways to continue to serve our communities in a safe manner. And overall, this work would not be possible without the generous support of our donors. Your contributions will enable us to continue this critical work over the next year. Thank you again for joining us. And our first presentation will begin with the Gail Hafner Grassroots Advocacy Award. The award is named after one of DRM's own heroes. Gail was an attorney at DRM when we were called the Maryland Disability Law Center. As a powerful advocate who lived with a disability herself, Gail is the embodiment of the community movement this award honors.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to present Mr. Floyd Hartley with the Gail Hafner Grassroots Advocacy Award in recognition of his role as chairman of the Consumers for Accessible Ride Services, also known as CARS. CARS, in partnership with DRM, addresses systemic issues with Baltimore transportation for people with disabilities. They are a community resource for riders who've experienced problems with Maryland transportation. CARS provides advice to local agencies in charge of Baltimore transportation. They've hosted many town hall meetings to get input from the community. In 2017, Floyd testified in a lawsuit against MTA to address extremely long telephone hold times and a flawed eligibility process resulting in denials of services to qualified individuals with disabilities. The lawsuit resulted in a favorable settlement. In 2019, CARS and DRM demanded an emergency response from the governor to the crisis facing disabled riders of MTA Mobility Services. Floyd has faced those same barriers and has often served as a peer support for others. Floyd is selfless and always willing to help at a moment's notice to make certain that people with disabilities are treated fairly and that their voices are heard, and he often being a voice for others. He is empathetic and really cares about the well-being of others. He is a true friend. Floyd is a true humanitarian and wants people with disabilities to have equal access in society. He is no stranger to barriers that others have encountered, and he remains committed to being a change agent. I have had the pleasure of working with Floyd and a few others from the CARS team on another DRM project, and he is just as committed. He is knowledgeable and familiar with the processes and always gives the right guidance. I learned that he loves peanut M&Ms. Floyd has demonstrated leadership and has contributed greatly to causes that have impacted disability rights. And now I present Mr. Floyd Hartley with the Gail Hafner Grassroots Advocacy Award.
This is beautiful. Thank you so much. This means a lot to the CARS members and to myself also. One thing I'd like to say is that on behalf of CARS and especially myself, I just want to say that Gail Hafner was a educator. She was a great individual. She was an inspiration to me and a great friend. And she taught me a lot of things, and she always mentioned to me when we set out to do things and people were in our way that no did not mean no. That meant to keep on going and to pursue what you were after. So again, I accept this on behalf of the CARS members, and I'd like to say that our work has been instrumental and very helpful to the disability community and to the public. It's given us a way to reach out to individuals who don't have a chance to lend their voice to people in higher positions that have authority to make a difference in our lives. So this is truly a great award, and we will continue to reach out to not only the disability community, but reach out to those who actually have their lives in our hands, so to speak. But we want to make sure that the playing field is made even, and that people in the disability community, that they can always count on us to reach out on their behalf. CARS started about 5 years ago, but we had already been in existence maybe 3 years before that. But we needed to have an identity to the community so that we could be a resource to reach out to them. We have also been able to reach out to different organizations and have like town hall meetings, not only with dealing with disability, but also with those town hall meetings, helping people to register to vote. So, we think it's very important not just to be a part of the mobility community, but have access for people to vote also. We have also been able to reach out to seniors buildings where vulnerable adults don't have a chance to get out and have a voice in these matters. So we'll continue to fight for the rights of the CARS members and for those in the community, because we know the work is never finished, because there's always things that are going on with mobility that need improvements. So again, I thank you so very much on behalf of CARS, and the struggle will continue. And again, I thank you so very much. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Manib Larosby. I am a staff attorney here at Disability Rights Maryland. I've been with the organization for about 3 years, and the focus of my work are conditions in state correctional facilities, particularly the use of restrictive housing and access to mental health services for folks on the inside. My work here started as an OSI Baltimore Community Fellow with sort of a narrow goal to review conditions inside correctional facilities. I wound up conducting a death investigation at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women, and what we found there was that a lot of the issues that played into that tragedy really affected the system at large. The use of restrictive housing, the less than ideal access to mental health services. These were things that we were seeing in several other facilities and that were systemic. So as the Protection and Advocacy Agency, DRM does have this unique access authority to monitor conditions, yes, but also to advocate advocate for changes that respect the humanity and dignity of any sort of service recipient of mental health services in the state.
Hi, my name is Megan Berger. I'm here in Disability Rights Maryland's beautiful outdoor courtyard. I'm an education attorney here, so I do special education and school discipline work. And I primarily work on a project aimed at disrupting the school to prison pipeline. So we represent individual students, and we also do local and state level policy work to change the policies and practices that are pushing students with disabilities and students of color out of school and subjecting them to school-based arrests. And an exciting project that the education unit is working on right now is, because of COVID and the school closures, education looks really different right now. So we have started weekly Facebook Live question and answer sessions. And so we're really able to connect with the community. Parents and families are able to dial in and ask us their questions. We've been able to share videos of the question and answer sessions, and we've had over 1,000 views per video. So that's been a really, really exciting way to make an impact during the COVID closures.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming to Disability Rights Maryland's annual gala. My name is Ben Jackson. I'm a staff attorney here at Disability Rights Maryland, and my primary focuses are on employment and voting rights for individuals with disabilities. During the previous legislative session, we had two pieces of legislation, one to allow for virtual interviews as a reasonable accommodation, and another to do vote by mail. As everybody knows, we had the primary election be a vote by mail election, and most workplaces has turned to virtual meetings. I would just encourage everyone to listen to those who are most directly impacted and empower them as we continue to move forward and progress. And thanks everyone so much for your continued support.
Our next award recognizes someone with a decades-long history of fighting for justice and equity for people with disabilities here in Maryland. The Lorraine Sheehan Lifetime Achievement Award is named for the former Maryland Secretary of State, who would later become President of the ARC of the United States. And I can think of no one more deserving of this award than Andy Levy. It is my pleasure, on behalf of Disability Rights Maryland, to present you for your decades of accomplishments with the Lorraine Sheehan Lifetime Achievement Award.
Robin, thank you very, very much. This is incredibly flattering, and to be mentioned in the same breath as Lorraine Sheehan is incredibly flattering. Lorraine was a remarkable woman. She was way ahead of her time, but it was her form of leadership, the way she led without histrionics, but just sort of quiet and firm, very confident, and did enormous things. We are all in her debt, and I will really treasure this award, having Lorraine's name on it and coming from DRM. So thank you very, very much.
So Andy, you're such an accomplished litigator in so many areas. It's really rare for somebody to have expertise both in civil and in criminal, in litigation and appellate law, at the same time teach. I know many of the lawyers, as a lawyer myself, are wondering, do you ever sleep? And how do you do all this?
I feel like I'm always sort of chasing down deadlines to the very last minute, and I always feel like things are never quite good enough, but this is as good as we can get it in the deadline we've got. In truth, I'm constantly reminded these days that every time we think we've sort of won the war, of course we haven't. We're lucky if we win the individual battle, but it never, particularly in the area that you and I litigate in, these battles are never won permanently, and we're reminded of that constantly over the last few years. I think we all sort of thought we knew how the movie ended, and we're not so sure anymore, and it seems more in doubt than it seemed only a few years ago. So every time you think you've accomplished something, there are just so many other battles to be fought. Tracy Kidder wrote Mountains Beyond Mountains, and I think that says it better than I could say it.
So it sounds like your commitment is a great motivator.
It is, and there's just so much to do, and there are so many battles to be fought.
Also, people will be interested, you take on pro bono cases, and that's an integral, a really important part of your practice. Why is that important to you?
Having a law degree is a privilege. Being a member of the bar is a privilege. And a bargain comes along with that, which is you have to use it not just to earn a living, but also to try to give back and use this this talent, this ability for not just yourself. And it's something that I think lawyers owe. We owe it to people who don't have our skills, don't have our advantages, our background, our tools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what do you see as the most important issues going forward in the disability rights movement?
I think that disability, for the most part, is still not seen as a real civil right. And that's true even among some very progressive, right-thinking people, that many people don't see it as being on the same level as many of the other civil rights battles which have been fought, which are being fought. And I think that getting disability to be treated as a legitimate, progressive civil rights cause and deserving of the same status as other civil rights fights is, I think, a job that's very much undone or not complete now. And that is, I think, we're going to have to work very hard in order to achieve that.
And I'm sure the staff at Disability Rights Maryland would totally agree with you.
Well, they are a wonderful group of lawyers. I go way back with Lauren and Nancy and Leslie, and it is a great thrill to to have this opportunity to give them a shout out, and the rest of the folks they work with. It really is God's work, and the people who depend on them for what they do are very, very lucky that your lawyers are willing to do what they do.
In addition to being a family law attorney, I'm also the mother of 2 young children. Both of my children have learning-based differences. And as a parent, I've learned how important it is to be an advocate for your children. I see that Disability Rights Maryland steps into those shoes for so many children, and also so many of our clients, to help them get the rights that they're entitled to within the educational system, when it comes to voting, when it comes to where they live, when it comes to participating in day-to-day activities. And that is so important, and I'm so proud to be a part of that as a mother and as a lawyer. In the last 6 months, I see how hard COVID has hit the area, especially the disability community. DRM has shifted its work to helping those with COVID and has stepped up in every way possible. I've seen and benefited personally from the Facebook Live meetings that they're doing for parents of children who are virtual learning and having to deal with the IEP systems between their one-page rights documents and also their in-person question answering. It could not be better as a resource to me as a parent.
Hi, my name is Ryan Perlin. I am a proud member of the Board of Disability Rights Maryland. I'm currently serving as its vice president. My connection with the disability rights community is a personal one. 10 years ago, my wife and I were blessed with the birth of a beautiful daughter named Millie. Millie was born with Down syndrome, and so there were so many things that we took for granted and were frankly naive about before Millie was born, as it relates to the barriers that people with disabilities face on a daily basis. Once Millie was born and we started seeing the world through her eyes and navigating the world with her, we began to realize that those barriers exist not just physically, but also socially. There's a stigma related to disabilities. There is a feeling in the world that people with disabilities need to be put on the sidelines, need to be marginalized. And the reason for that is because it's sometimes hard to face differences and it's hard to face the challenges that come with making the world a fair and an equal place for everybody. At the same time, as we've navigated Millie's life with her, we've seen that there are so many things in place designed to help people with disabilities have that fair and equal footing. And we've learned that those things are not there because of altruistic ideas that anybody's ever had. They're there because people before us fought for them. They're there because people before us saw a barrier and they decided that the only way was to go through it.
Hi, my name is Neil Ellis. I'm the president of the Board of Directors of Disability Rights Maryland. I've been a member of the board for 5 years. I first became involved when DRM approached Sidley Austin, the law firm where I was a partner at the time, seeking pro bono assistance on an individual case. I agreed to assist on that case, and then I agreed to take on another and then another. I came to admire the staff attorneys at DRM who were dedicating their careers to work in this field. When I was asked to join the board in 2015, I was completely won over and wholeheartedly agreed. After 5 years, I remain awed and humbled by the people who work for DRM. The attorneys and investigators and staff work every day to assist the most vulnerable and overlooked members of our communities, and in every imaginable circumstance. From schools to homes to prisons to transportation, from medical needs to voting rights to accessibility and inclusion efforts, for the developmentally and physically challenged and blind and hard of hearing, they do it all. I am overwhelmed simply hearing the stories of their work, what they get up every morning to do.
Today, Disability Rights Maryland has the privilege of presenting Wade Henderson, former president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, with a new award that recognizes an individual with unparalleled commitment to disability rights advocacy and who has achieved transformational change on a national scale. The award will be named in honor of a person who is the archetype of these words, Judith Heumann.
It is the latest struggle for civil rights and integration into the mainstream of American life. For more than 40 million Americans who are physically or mentally disabled, a new era is dawning. A bill nearing passage in Congress would mandate equal access for the disabled to employment, transportation, and public places.
This legislation is a bill of rights for the disabled, and America will be a better and fairer nation because of it.
Disabled persons are here today to ensure for the class of disabled Americans the ordinary daily life that non-disabled Americans too often take for granted. The right to ride a bus or a train, the right to any job for which we are qualified, the right to enter any theater, restaurant, or public accommodation. The passage of this monumental legislation will make it clear that our government will no longer allow the largest minority group in the United States to be denied equal opportunity. To do any less is immoral.
For 50 years, Judith's leadership has been a cornerstone of the disability rights movement, as she has brought together and empowered coalitions of advocates and allies to fight for fairness and to demand that communities, schools, and workplaces across America become more accessible and more inclusive. When Judy was born in 1947, the law provided little protection to people with disabilities. And as a child, she was denied access to the public education system because of her physical disability. After fighting to be accepted to a local high school, and then for equity on campus while at university, Judy would achieve the first of many major reforms when she sued the New York City Board of Education after being denied a license to teach because of her disability. Judy's lawsuit resulted in a settlement that enabled her to become the first ever wheelchair user to teach in New York City. Soon after, she co-founded Disabled in Action and quickly achieved a landmark victory against the most powerful office in America, campaigning against President Nixon's repeated veto of legislation extending civil rights protections to people with disabilities. The president finally signed the Rehabilitation Act in September 1973, but refused to enforce key components of the law, including Section 504, which made it illegal for a person with a disability to be excluded from participation in, be denied from the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving financial assistance. The election of President Carter brought renewed focus to Section 504, after the cabinet secretary responsible for implementing it failed to do so. Judy and more than 150 others held a sit-in at federal offices in San Francisco, remaining resolute for 28 days and leaving only after regulations implementing 504 had been signed. In the decades that followed, the disability rights movement has continued to demand and achieve transformational changes in areas as fundamental as fair housing, Social Security, education, and in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Judy has continued to lead this fight in the US and internationally, serving under President Clinton at the Department of Education and the State Department under President Obama, as well as the World Bank and the Ford Foundation. Judy's resolute advocacy has shaped and continues to shape the places that people with disabilities live, work, and learn, and the disability rights movement itself. It is with deepest gratitude that Disability Rights Maryland honors this work by inaugurating the Judith Heumann Champion of Justice Award.
I'd like to thank Disability Rights Maryland for all the hard work that they've done to put this gala on tonight. And as all of you know, who've been attending galas or been involved in helping to set them up, this is not a very easy task. I'm also very honored that Disability Rights Maryland chose to create an award in my name. I very much appreciate the acknowledgement of work that I've done over the last number of decades. I also felt it was really important that what we wanted to do in naming this award after me is to highlight efforts that have gone on over the last decades to advance the rights of disabled people around the United States, and for that matter, around the world, and also to be able to award this to a person, Wade Henderson, who I think really has been one of the leaders in advancing the inclusion of disability in the civil and human rights arenas. We've seen over my lifetime where we had no laws protecting the rights of disabled individuals. When I was born in 1947, the very strong emergence, or at least much more publicly understood, civil rights movement that was obviously going on for hundreds of years, but really with the advent of television, newspapers, radio, we saw a much broader set of information that was coming forward to people. And for myself, using a motorized wheelchair where there was no accessible transportation, I was really limited in being able to, as I got older, participate in activities to advance the rights of Black people in the South and around the United States. But I was learning. I was learning from other disabled people and myself that the oppression of disabled people of all colors in the United States was quite significant, and that the laws that were being developed in the area of civil rights were not inclusive of disabled individuals. It's taken us many decades to really continue to expand our movement so that the civil rights movement for non-disabled people now is also representative of the civil rights movement for disabled people. And today, we are really a much stronger, unified movement. And I really give credit to a lot of that work to Wade, who, when he became the executive director of LCCHR, really was learning from work that he had done previously with the NAACP and the ACLU, and for that matter, his own personal experiences, both as a Black teenager and as a teenager who also had a cousin with a disability. Wade and I were talking earlier, And I was asking him, how did he begin to get involved more, both in the civil rights movement, but specifically in the area of disability. And he told a very poignant story, which he may want to tell later. But for me, the story of his outright being discriminated against at Garfinkel's in a very prestigious store at that time in Washington, D.C., prohibiting him from trying on a suit that he had proudly gone in to buy with money that he had earned and direction from his family, and basically being laughed at and said, you can't try clothes on in Garfinkel's. That experience is one that I had in many different ways, and that people of color and disabled people of color continue to face outright discrimination without any thought to the impact that it has on our lives. For me, one of the values of the expansion of the civil rights movement to include disabled people, which was led by people like Ralph Neese and Pat Wright and Justin Dart and Wade and others, really shows the maturity and development of our movements. And I think we not only are an example in the United States to talk about how different voices can come together to really articulate a more singular objective, but I think it's also very important from an international perspective to be able to show what we in the United States have been able to do over many decades, but ultimately with a very strong commitment that we are one movement. So it's really an honor for me to be able to give you, Wade, this award, which someone is helping me pick up. And can you turn around? So the Disability Rights Award, Disability Rights Maryland, Wade Henderson, is given the Judith Heumann Champion of Justice Award for 2020, the Breaking Barriers Award at the Breaking Barriers Awards Gala. And I'm really sorry, Wade, that I can't physically be handing this to you. It's such an honor for me to be giving this honor to you. And I really want to thank you for the leadership work that you have done for these many decades, and I know will continue to do. And I look forward to continuing to working with you. Again, thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Judith. I'm really overwhelmed. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for your time tonight in support of the great Disability Rights Maryland. As Judith said, I'm Wade Henderson, and I am deeply honored to be with you on this extraordinary evening. I want to first thank Disability Rights Maryland Executive Director Robin Murphy for her persistence and commitment to maintain one of the important traditions of DRM, and that is the Breaking Barriers Awards Gala, even in the middle of a once-in-a-century global pandemic. Congratulations, Robin. You and your team deserve much credit for pulling this virtual gala together and doing it with style. Second, I'd like to thank the DRM board for its vision in creating the Judith Heumann Champion of Justice Award, and of course, Judy herself for presenting this first ever award to me this evening. I'm truly humbled and deeply moved to receive this award, and with your permission, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to tell you why. Now, I would hope we'd all agree that disability rights are civil rights and disability rights are human rights. I also hope we'd agree that civil and human rights must be measured by a single yardstick. Disability Rights Maryland was founded in 1975, less than 50 years ago, to advance and protect the rights of persons with disabilities. It was born in the fire of a national scandal in response to disgustingly squalid conditions in institutional facilities for people with disabilities. Some of you may remember the horrific Willowbrook facility in Long Island, New York. The DRM continues today to break new ground, as in the case of a young woman with disabilities, including serious mental illness, who committed suicide after being placed in a restrictive housing unit at the Maryland Correctional Institute for Women. DRM launched an investigation in response to disturbing allegations of neglect and abuse. The resulting report of its inquiry, entitled Segregation and Suicide, Confinement at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women, has shaken up for the better the treatment of women with disabilities in the Maryland detention system. We salute DRM for its steadfast commitment to the rights of people with disabilities and its extraordinary skill in cementing those rights under law. And now for a few words about Judy Heumann, the Judith Heumann Champion of Justice Award, and why this honor means so much to me. I think, again, that these are strange and challenging times. The COVID pandemic with a loss of over 210,000 US lives, a racial reckoning and a challenge to systemic racism unlike anything we have seen in the last 50 years, and an economy in shambles with a devastating, disproportionate impact on people of color and people with disabilities. Moreover, the assault on voting rights, which is all around us, is a direct assault on American democracy. In the middle of this difficulty, the nation has lost two of its most significant icons, whose very existence symbolized the struggle for equality in American life. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG, and the legendary John Lewis, the civil rights conscience of the Congress and the nation, were the embodiment of the very best of America. Each in their own unique way advanced the struggle for justice and equal protection of the law that has left an indelible mark on our national struggle to build an America as good as its ideals. Judith Heumann is a name that has also left an indelible mark on our democracy. Much like Ginsburg, Judy was an activist at the birth of a social movement helping to conceptualize the meaning of disability rights at a time when persons with disabilities were better seen than heard, and preferably neither seen nor heard. Much like John Lewis, Judy believes in getting in good trouble, necessary trouble, when it comes to challenging a system hell-bent on preserving a fundamentally unequal and sclerotic status quo. Judy didn't just shine a bright light on the mistreatment of people with disabilities. That had been done before. Judy made us understand that people with disabilities had a right to be in the mainstream of life. Everyone deserves a right to go to public schools, travel comfortably, and live independently. And even more importantly, she showed the world that people with disabilities had a voice, could demand equal treatment under the law, and win. Now, this was no easy task. It involved major disruptions in the streets, in the courthouses, and in government buildings. Nights turned into weeks and weeks into months until finally her leadership and her struggles of her colleagues compelled HHS Secretary Joseph Califano to sign the Section 504 regulations of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It was one of the first civil rights laws offering protection for people with disabilities, and it was one of the civil rights community's greatest victories. Judy and her team worked in coalition with others to bring about change, and they did not stop there. Additional lobbying eventually led to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Her strategies and tactics should be taught in our history classes and university public policy classes across the country. Anytime the word social justice appears in our textbook, Judy Heumann's name must be included. So to receive an award in the name of Judith Heumann for a lifetime of advocacy and a commitment to disability rights is a recognition beyond my imagination. I accept this award not for myself, but rather for the men and women who, over my 40-year career, pursued a shared commitment to building a better world, a world that includes people with disabilities. Their names are too numerous to mention this evening, but some of them are undoubtedly attending tonight's program. Now, if only one name can be uttered tonight, let it be that of the great Justin Dart, from whom I learned so much about the disability rights movement and who was one of the fathers of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Justin helped reinforce my view that in coalition there is strength, and only in coalition can we possibly accomplish the vision we share with Judy. And while we celebrate tonight some of the accomplishments on our journey, much remains to be done. Let us use this evening's program not just to celebrate, but as a rededication to the mission and values we hold dear. So it's in that spirit that I accept the Judith Heumann Champion of Justice Award. Thank you for your commitment to building a better world which sees us, which hears us, and which truly values all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wade. Those are beautiful remarks, and the people that you noted, in particular, Justin Dart, who was definitely a hero of mine. I mean, one thing that I know is there are many leaders in our movement, and we would not be able to have made the achievements that we've made thus far unless there was a very strong group of disability rights leaders, both at the national level and around the country. So I have a question for you. Your work in the civil rights movement and with the LCCHR has gone on for many years. You were the executive director until from 1996 to 2017. But prior to that, you were with the NAACP and with the ACLU. What do you think are some of the major changes that have gone on within the rights space and civil rights space movements that people finally have understood that discrimination against disabled people of color, intergenerationally, is an issue we all have to fight to improve?
It's a great question, Judy. I will say that one of the things that I think the civil rights movement has learned over the years is the importance of coalition politics, the importance of intersectionality, recognizing that issues of race, ethnicity, gender, disability status, sexual orientation, all of those issues ultimately come together around questions of inequality and whether individuals are treated fairly in American life. Sometimes it took campaigns by the individual communities that we're talking about to bring to the attention of the broader public the similarity and ultimately the values that brought us together. But it was a period of time. The Leadership Conference began in 1950 really as the legislative arm of the Black community to try to achieve rights on behalf of African Americans. But in the course of that effort, it became apparent that you had to measure civil and human rights with a single yardstick. And if you were working to advance rights for one community, ultimately you had to embrace a standard that took into account the circumstances of us all. And I think the broader community in the 21st century recognizes that in ways that we didn't at the start of the modern movement some 60 or 70 years ago. I also think there is an appreciation that new tactics, new techniques are needed to bring issues to the fore. I know, Judy, that in your work, both from mentioned in your book, but also in the film Crip Camp, the documentary that the Obamas helped produce, it was quite evident that many of the efforts that you and your colleagues borrowed from were taken from the movement of rights on behalf of African Americans. And adapting those challenges, or rather those rights, to the work that you pursued on behalf of the disability community was smart. And it really helped to show and lay a foundation for what could be accomplished on behalf of others going forward. I think those things have been really understood. And then lastly, I think that it is very clear that civil and human rights are not partisan issues. They are national issues. And that if you hope to advance an agenda, whether it's at the national level or at the local, state and local level, you have to really bring in the voices of both major parties, both Democrats and Republicans, and others who are beyond those parameters, have to be encouraged to see themselves in the movement we represent. I think the disability community has done an excellent job in establishing that kind of bipartisan involvement, and I hope that it extends to other communities as well as we move forward.
For me, one of the important parts of the Black Lives Matter movement is the fact that it has really brought the voices of so many more disabled people of color into the forefront of the movement. And films like Crip Camp and the Impact Campaign that they have been working on for this past year, really prominently bringing forward voices of greater diversity, I think really is very important for the entire civil and human rights movement. I want to thank Disability Rights Maryland for both honoring me and you tonight. And I think for me, what I hope the audience takes away is that in order for us really to achieve the objectives of DRM, we must really ensure that we are fighting for the rights of all disabled individuals, all of whom are marginalized in one degree or another, but really to look for the poorest of the poor, to ensure that the voices of disabled people in areas like education, where we know in Maryland that disabled individuals of color are being suspended and expelled from school at higher rates, since I don't believe anybody should be expelled from school. Kids are winding up in juvenile facilities when money should be coming from the state to educate children, not putting money into prisons, police reform, and other activities. And I know that DRM has really been a fighter in this area for decades, and I really look forward to seeing the work that you all are going to continue to do over the next number of decades, both to ensure that existing laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act, the IDEA 504, etc., are effectively implemented, but they are also able to fight for additional legislation to ensure that people can live in the community, home and community-based services, so that the COVID experience that we are seeing, where so many people have died, who are people of color, poor people, and people who are living in segregated situations because we do not have the appropriate laws and policies in place. And I know that DRM really has been fighting on these issues for many years, and I really look forward to continuing to work with you and support your efforts to ensure that we take corrective actions as quickly as possible. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ava. I am your daughter, and I am...
Why are we sitting here today being recorded?
Well, in school, as part of our 7th grade curriculum, I have a book report to write about a person who has stood up for the rights of people who weren't being treated fairly. And this year, the person that I chose was Judith Heumann. Well, going into this project, I knew that I wanted to do someone who was very important in the disability rights community, because I have a younger sister who has Down syndrome, and so disability rights are very important to my family and me. Well, what I think is the most moving about her story is at the HEW building sit-in in San Francisco, all of the people, they all united together to find one cause, and it was so incredible how at their meetings everybody got a chance to speak no matter how long it lasted, and everybody, every day they would just ask to stay one more day, and it was so incredible, the bonds that they all formed with each other, and that is the main reason they were all successful. And I sometimes find myself like sitting in my room and thinking, how can I make my life a memorable one? I want people to remember me, and I don't necessarily know how I can do that all by myself. And then reading her story, I realized that I can't do it all by myself. It's because of other people and your bonds with other people that we are successful in anything.